So I'm sure that you all have heard about the Nottoway Plantation burning down in Chile. When I tell you, I just have a smile on my face. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. Oh, freedom. And before I be a slave, I be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord to be free. Woo, Chile. Now that I done got that out of my system, let's actually talk about the Nottoway Plantation and everything that's wrong with it, right? So a couple years ago, I actually went on a plantation tour at the Whitney Plantation, and it was like, y'all, it was astounding. I tell you, if you are ever in the New Orleans area, because the Whitney Plantation is not in New Orleans proper, we drove like an hour to get there-ish, right? You really need to go to the Whitney Plantation. The Whitney Plantation is everything that a plantation tour should be. It focused on the lives of the people who were enslaved there, and it paid such beautiful tribute to those people, right? Like, they had these big plaques with all of the names of the people who were enslaved on the plantation. They had all of these firsthand accounts that were carved into the plaques, from the people, again, who were enslaved on that plantation, etc., etc., etc. Like, the entire plantation tour was talking about slavery. That's what it's about. It's a plantation. What else could it be about, right? You would think. But let's talk about how initially I wasn't even going to go on a plantation tour because I was searching through, the plantations in the area, right? And most of them were basically like going with the wind fantasies for white people. Ooh, come down here and play Scarlett O'Hara fiddle dee dee. It'll be so fun. Like, most of the plantations, pretty much all of them that I looked into were like that. And then finally, I luckily stumbled across the Whitney Plantation, right? And that brings us to this Nottoway Plantation. Now, let's pretend that I am looking for plantation tours to go on. I'm checking this website out. Let's go ahead and look at the Nottoway Plantation and Resort's website. First of all, it is a resort, y'all, which is crazy enough because imagine if somebody had a concentration camp resort. Why would you why would you want to go to a resort that is on the grounds of a concentration camp? It's the same thing I think to myself when I see something like this. Why would you want to go to a plantation resort? Like, what? But this goes to show us how white people view black victimhood. These people can go to a place where black people were beaten, tortured, killed for centuries, etc., 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 and they can completely ignore all that and just say, yeah, this is a resort, my dog diggity. How can you do something like that? And it's crazy because even though I'm not white, I could never go to a concentration camp resort knowing what people went through there, right? So it's wild when I see how white people can look at black pain and suffering and it doesn't even register, but whatever, right? Let's go ahead and read the About section from their website. Nottoway is one of the South's largest historic mansions, located on the famous River Road between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, Louisiana. The mansion's massive white columns and grand balconies stand guard over the Mississippi River, while on the north side, the spectacular three-story rotunda overlooks sweeping oak-draped lawns. Please come visit us. We'd love to share with you the fascinating history, the enchanting luxury, and the warm hospitality of Nottoway. Now, let's look at the history tab on their website. The Oaks. Nottoway's grounds feature 16 majestic oak trees spread across the 31-acre property. The oldest tree on the property is estimated to be 162 years old, the same age as the mansion itself. In 2015, 11 of the 16 trees were registered with the Live Oak Society of the Louisiana Garden Club Federation, Incorporated. Each of the 11 trees were named after the Randolph children and can be identified on the grounds by the plaque at the base of each of the trees. Listed below are the facts on these historic trees. Enjoy walking our property and see if you can find them all. So now we have a list of the oak trees. They have names, okay? Now I'm not going to read them all, but I'll just read the first one, okay? The name of the first one is Ella Eugenia. It is 162 years old. The trunk diameter is 6 feet and 3 inches, and the canopy spread is 105 feet. Now, the tours tab was very short. It just said tours are given 7 days a week and listed the times. But you know what? Let me actually go back to that because I want to look at the price of the tickets because I have to raise the question, who's getting paid from this, right? I don't think it's the descendants of the people who were enslaved on this plantation. In fact, it's probably the other way around, okay? So an adult ticket is $25 and kids 5 and under have free admission with the purchase of adult tickets, okay? Now we're going to go on and look at the portraits tab, okay? So a 3-hour inclusive session costs $800. It includes use of bridal salon dressing room and a 3-hour photo session time for the bridal photo shoot. Photo shoot access to the following: access to public area and stairwell inside mansion, access to the mansion's white room, limited time frame, access to public areas on the grounds, i.e. under oaks, fountain, front lawn, and garden. The photographer is not included. Prepaid reservation is required, and photo sessions must not intrude on other hotel guests' privacy. Oh, wow. Oh, and let me not forget to read the top of the portrait section. Capture life's most precious moments with a portrait session at Nottoway. Whether you are looking for bridal, engagement, family, or senior portraits, what better backdrop than the stunning mansion and the sweeping oaks of Nottoway? Okay, now let's go on. Let's look at the rooms tab. Okay, so they have different areas. Apparently, they have the boys' wing, the garden house, the cottages, the carriage house, and the suites. So I went ahead, I clicked book now so that I could see the prices. And these rooms start at, oh wait, no, they don't start at $210. The cheapest room I see currently is $159. That is the Creole Cottage Queen room, okay? Yeah, it appears that is the cheapest room, right? Then the next cheapest is $189. And these rooms go up to $329 a night for the VIP suite, okay? So somebody's making bank off of these bookings, I assume. Now let's go ahead, let's look at the dining tab. Nottoway's Mansion Restaurant offers classic Louisiana cuisine, Creole inspired with outstanding service. This plantation restaurant features a beautifully restored turn-of-the-century dining room with stunning views of century-old oak trees. We have outdoor dining available as well, blah, 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 so and so and so. Then they have the hours listed for the bar, breakfast, lunch, dinner, what time those are served, etc., etc., etc. Now we are going to go ahead. We are going to look at the weddings tab. Now, I don't see any prices under here. They say to request information about booking your wedding. Now, I don't know how much weddings cost, but I know they're expensive. So they probably don't want to put the price on here to deter people, right? But when you scroll down a little, they have different photo galleries. So they have ceremonies, receptions, brides and more, bridal salon, honeymoon suite, right? And you can go ahead, you can click on brides and more and see a bunch of happy white couples like, oh, golly gee willikers, all we need is a couple of niggers here to wait on us hand and foot, and this day will just be complete. So there is a clip missing from right here. I was saying like, oh, next we're going to look at the event booking, you know, like if places are holding a conference or something, you know, usually they do stuff like that at hotels, but apparently this plantation has that offering as well, right? Now, the same way that there were no prices on the wedding tab, there are no prices here, right? But they have a number of event facilities that you can book, and each, you know, facility can host a different number of people. The largest one is the Grand Pavilion Tent, and that one can host 400 people, right? So just imagine how much that costs, okay? Now, at the top here, not quite the top where the different tabs are, but beneath that there are more tabs. And it says overview, event facilities, event accommodations, retreats, and murder mystery dinner theaters. So there's a lot of stuff going on here. Well, there was a lot of stuff going on here at the Nottoway Plantation, but we know there's not anymore, right? Let's go ahead and let's look at the murder mystery dinner theater, okay? Step back in time and enjoy both a grand adventure and a fabulous dinner at Nottoway Plantation. The evening begins with past hors d'oeuvres and champagne, after which a four-course dinner will be served. In between courses, you'll enjoy a fascinating mystery story set in 1859 and featuring Nottoway and her original owners, John and Emily Randolph. Throughout the evening, 7 actors and actresses dressed in detailed 1850s period clothing will perform between dinner courses. As the action unfolds in front of you, the cast will also invite you to participate in helping to solve the mystery. It's a fun, thrilling evening with great food and wine. So that brings us to the end of the tabs. There is a tab that says more, and it just says gallery. I'm assuming it's, the same albums that I mentioned previously, right? But I think it's interesting how there was absolutely no mention of slavery at all on this website. Like, I would think that slavery would be a large part of the history of a plantation, but somehow it was not mentioned at all here. I'm going to share a story with you all really quickly that goes back to this. Okay, so if you've been subscribed to me for a couple of years, you may remember this happening. If not, then back in 2021, I was going to graduate school at the University of Michigan, right? Now, every fall, they have some big dance called the Fall Ball for graduate students to attend. I guess it's, just an excuse to dress up, whatever, right? So they sent an email out and they said the theme of this year's Fall Ball is party like the 20s, the 1820s. And then they said, oh, think, big dresses and this and that and so and so and so. And I replied to the email and I said, oh, okay, should I come dressed up like a field slave or a house slave? Because when I think of the 1820s, I'm not thinking of big ball gowns and fun parties. I'm thinking of slavery. Like, what are we talking about here, right? And I guess enough people complained. I don't know if it was just me or what, right? To where they sent out an email like, oh, wow, we are so sorry. Yeah, we're going to change the theme of the Fall Ball, right? But I'm sharing this story now for a reason. Something I said back then, right, is that white people and black people view slavery differently. We do, right? When I think of the 1820s, right, I'm not thinking of anything happy or positive or fun or anything. I'm thinking of the worst time in black people's lives. You know what I'm saying? When white people think of the 1820s, though, they're thinking of sitting on their asses, making a bunch of money, not doing anything, getting fanned, getting weighted to hand and foot, putting on pretty dresses, going to dances and stuff, right? There's a completely different perspective on slavery when it comes to white people versus black people. Black people, when we think of slavery, we think of, again, the worst time in our lives. But when white people think of slavery, they think of the best time in their lives. The website for the Nottoway Plantation goes back to this point. There is no way any black people work at this place, run this place, edit this website, whatever, and this is the way that they chose to run it or depict it. There's simply no way, right? Like, you telling me not only did you not mention the black people who were enslaved on this plantation, you didn't mention it at all, right? But you sat there and named the oak trees on this plantation. Are you kidding me? Like, that is so disrespectful. That's actually disrespectful. Because, like I said, it'd be one thing if you just, you didn't name the people who were enslaved there. That's disrespectful enough. But you turn around and you named the fucking oak trees. Are you serious? You got a whole table talking about, yeah, this oak tree is named so-and-so, and it's 162 years old. I wonder what else was happening on that plantation 162 years ago, because I don't think that the planting of this oak tree is the most significant thing that happened on this plantation in that year, but maybe I'm tripping. Y'all can gaslight all y'all want to, because I know y'all about to come to the comments, black people, the perpetual victims, they're always trying to be oppressed, so and so and so. But this is the reality. No other group of people gets disrespected like black people. If there was any other group of people that went through anything, and mind you, whatever they went through ain't hitting on what slavery was hitting on, period, right? If there was any other group of people, right, that went through anything, right, The place where they went through said thing would be a historical site, would be a museum, would be, oh, like, yeah, this is a tribute to those people and what happened here and yada, yada, yada. They would never be no fucking resort where the people who were victims there are not mentioned, but the trees are mentioned by name. Are you kidding me? Y'all want to know what I noticed, right? And this is true of America, period, but also like in the Detroit area, right? And not Detroit proper, but I'm talking about the suburbs and stuff, right? There is more of an emphasis on the Holocaust than there is on slavery. And that don't make no sense. Now, I'm not sitting here saying that the Holocaust wasn't bad or downplaying it or anything like that. Of course not. It was horrific. But it was not as bad as slavery. That's not up for dispute. Y'all can come to the comments. There's no need for an oppression Olympics. You're right, bitch, because you're going to fucking lose it. Like, that's just the facts, right? Even though, one, the Holocaust was not as bad as slavery, and then two, slavery is more pertinent to the United States of America, way more pertinent, right? The Holocaust gets more of an emphasis in the United States of America than slavery does. What sense does that make? Oh, wait, yeah, well, the Holocaust affected white people and slavery affected black people. So, well, okay, there's the difference. One thing I've said about white people before is that they are not stupid. They might play dumb about racism. What? Golly gee, I don't see color, my dog diggity. They might play dumb, but they are not dumb at all, bro. The fact that they sat there and chose to name the trees that live on the plantation, but they didn't name the people who were enslaved there, that is so calculated and so clearly done on purpose, right? Like, I've mentioned this before. White people do this thing where, and I forget the term, y'all. Somebody had commented under my video like, oh, that's called this, right? And I forgot it, right? But white people do this thing where they do like, I'm not touching you type of racism, right? So very rarely will they come right out and call you the N-word because, anybody can say, oh, that's racist, right? No, they always do this shit where it's like they pretend they're not racist even though they are being racist. So when you call them out on saying racism, they can say, what? That's not racist. You make everything about racism. And this is the type of shit that I'm talking about, right? It's one thing to not mention the black people who were enslaved in that plantation, but your ass named the fucking trees and mentioned them. And then when a black person complains about this and says, well, this is clearly racist, of course they're just gonna be like, what? We're just talking about the oak trees that live there, the nature, the so and so, yada, yada, yada. Well, we're not racist at all. We didn't even mention black people. Like, this is the type of shit that I'm talking about, bro. On average, I think that black people seriously underestimate how much white people hate us. I really do, right? And I made a video years ago on YouTube, right? Because I had said that I hate white people. And of course, white people were like, golly gee willikers, I'm the true victim here, right? And I said, well, there's a clear difference between a black person saying that we hate white people versus a white person saying that they hate black people. And it's not even just about, the power imbalance or who's oppressed in this society or anything like that, punching up versus punching down. It's not even just about that, right? When a white person says they hate black people, you need to be concerned because they very well are probably putting on a white hood at night and riding out and looking for black people to kill and shit like that. Like, that's well within the realm of possibility, right? When a black person says they hate white people, they're not doing no shit like that. They're just frustrated and like, damn, like, just leave me alone, right? It's a completely different feeling of hatred. And I've stated before how different languages, and, it's going to sound like I'm getting sidetracked, but I'm not, right? Different languages express different things differently based off of, how their language evolved, right? So there are some cultures like Inuits and stuff who, they evolved in very snowy environments, right? And because of that, they might have like 20 words for snow. Oh, this word describes snow that is sticking. This word describes snow that is not sticking. This word describes snow that is this versus that versus this versus that, right? Whereas, another culture that doesn't get snow probably doesn't have a word to describe snow at all, right? Think of English. In English, we have one word, love, that describes a lot of different feelings, right? You tell your child you love him or her. You tell your siblings you love them. You tell your significant other you love him or her. You tell your parents you love them. You tell your friends you love them, etc., etc., etc. But these are all very different feelings, but they're described by the same word. And that brings me to my point, right? We're describing the different feelings that black people feel for white people versus the very different feelings that white people feel towards black people with the same word, hate. And they're, again, not the same feeling at all. So when a black person says, oh, I hate white people can immediately begin to be like, oh, I'm oppressed, I'm the victim, so and so and so. But we're not addressing the fact that when we say we hate white people, it is not at all the same as when a white person says they hate us, right? And it's crazy because their reaction to us saying it kind of tells on them, right? Because they know what it means when they say they hate us, and they think that we're saying the same thing to them. I said all that to say, right? You have to really hate a person, really hate them a lot, to put them through what white people put us through, and then just act like everything is good in the hood. Not only did you put me through that, but you didn't give me what you owed me, the reparations. You put me through some more with Jim Crow and, all of this other stuff, right? And then you will sit there and you will open a plantation resort. And this is how you describe it. The worst time in American history, right? This is how you describe it. Oh, yeah. Take a nice starlit swim at the garden pool. This is how you describe it, right? And it's just like, honestly, it can be so heartbreaking. It really can. So I'm going to read a little bit from the New York Post, okay? And first of all, there's a lot of ads on this. Like, I'm sorry, but we get to the point where it's like you can't even experience a website because there's so many ads. Like, I get that it's capitalism. You want the payments, but come on now. So, the owner of the largest remaining antebellum mansion in the South, which burned to the ground this week, hopes the 166-year-old Louisiana home will rise again. Okay, wait a second, hold up, because ain't that like a trigger word? Will rise again. The South will rise again. I've heard that before, like in reference to like the Civil War and the Confederacy. I don't know if that was in Gone with the Wind or something, but white people definitely say that in reference to, like slavery happening again. I don't know if I'm tripping, but I don't think so. Anyway, fire officials believe the cause of the Nottoway Plantation blaze was electrical and not suspicious. William Daniel Dyes, an attorney and preservationist, told the Post. The blaze may have started in a side bedroom. There had been a tour of the property that morning, said Dyes, who said he hopes to rebuild the home. Flames broke out at the estate in White Castle, about 30 minutes south of Baton Rouge, just after 2 p.m. on Thursday, drawing engines from 10 local fire departments who were helpless to stop the fire from torching all 53,000 square feet of the historic structure. One fire marshal called it the biggest fire they'd seen. No injuries were reported. Dyes only recently bought the home after the previous owner was killed in a car accident, he said. Oh, goodness. It's giving this place is cursed. I wonder why. Maybe something bad happened there. I can't quite put my finger on it. Nottoway was a sugar plantation operated and constructed by slave labor on behalf of John Hamden Randolph in 1859. The 165-room home became a museum in the 1980s, opening its doors to visitors from around the world. But a number of people on social media said they were glad to see it burn. Some call it a tragedy, but for many black folks, it feels like a small act of justice, a man named Neo from the Black Wall Street Times wrote on X. That house was built by enslaved hands and later turned into a wedding venue that profited off our pain. Maybe now our ancestors can rest a little easier. Sometimes ashes feel like freedom. Nottoway was a symbol of both the grandeur and deep complexities, Iberville Parish President Chris Daigle wrote on Facebook. While its early history is undeniably tied to a time of great injustice, over the last several decades, it evolved into a place of reflection, education, and dialogue, Daigle added. Dye said he understands the property's polarizing history, but doesn't align with its checkered past. I take this position. We are non-racist people. I am a lawyer and my wife is a judge. We believe in equal opportunity rights for everyone, total equality and fairness, Dye said. My wife and I had nothing to do with slavery, but we recognize the wrongness of it. We are trying to make this a better place. We don't have any interest in left-wing radical stuff. We need to move forward on a positive note here, and we are not going to dwell on past racial injustice. Dyes is also the owner of the Steel Magnolia House in Nottoway Natachitoches, I don't know what that says. The home after centerpiece of the 1989 film Steel Magnolias. Now, my question is this, right? Because Daigle claimed that the early history of the plantation is undeniably tied to a time of great injustice, but it evolved into a place of reflection, education, and dialogue. If it evolved into that, then why was there no mention of slavery at all on the website if it's actually a place for reflection, education, and dialogue, right? Because the Whitney Plantation, I would say, is a plantation that is really about education, reflection, and dialogue. I'll tell you that, right? Like, I had to take a moment to sit down at the Whitney Plantation and first of all, not just one moment, many moments, right? I sat down and just, I don't know, reflected, right? Reflected. There was so much education happening there, so much dialogue happening there, right? But again, considering the fact that you all don't even mention slavery on the website of this plantation, I wonder what exactly, like, what education is happening there, what reflection is happening. Like, I don't get it. Now, next, the owner of this place said, I take this position. We are non-racist people. I am a lawyer and my wife is a judge. First of all, how does that at all mean that you are not racist? Plenty of lawyers and judges are racist. Isn't that why there's sentencing discrepancies? like what? Like a black person can go to jail for 100 years. A white person can commit the same crime with the same criminal history and get 1 year in jail, right? So I don't get why you brought up you and your wife being lawyers and judges. That has nothing to do with not being racist, right? So then he goes on to say, my wife and I had nothing to do with slavery, but we recognize the wrongness of it. Now, this is already starting to get off track because white people always do this thing where they feel they have to distance themselves from something. Nobody said you had anything to do with slavery. Like, clearly you were not alive then, dumb. Like, clearly, right? But the fact that you have a plantation, right, where you're hosting weddings and shit, that definitely means that you are on the wrong side of things, right? Absolutely, okay? So then he goes on to say, we are trying to make this a better place. We don't have any interest in left-wing radical stuff. He says we need to move forward on a positive note here, and we are not going to dwell on past racial injustice. How are you building a plantation, right? A place where people were enslaved at, and you're talking about you're not going to dwell on past racial injustices? Like, how does that make sense? I don't get that because, like, yeah, the entire premise of the plantation is past racial injustice. So what are we talking about here? The next thing I want to point out is, what are you talking about? Left-wing radical stuff. What are you talking about? It's something I notice about white people, right? And it specifically be white Republicans. They randomly bring up political parties. Like, I posted a video the other day I think it was the video about the Caribbean woman twerking and folks were blaming black Americans, right? And somebody commented like, yeah, Democrats. What the fuck does this have to do with political parties? Like, what are we talking about here, right? But this is the thing about white people, period, right? Republican, Democrat, whatever, right? They speak in codes, okay? The thing about white people is they are very non-direct, right? So very rarely will they just come right out and be racist to your face. Very, very rarely. Usually they're going to speak in little codes. For example, instead of saying we have no interest in niggers complaining about racism, he talking about left-wing radical stuff. What are you talking about? But that's the same way how they use woke and DEI in place of black, right? Like, it's the same exact way. How do you have a plantation, right? And you talking about we are not going to dwell on past racial injustice. It's a plantation. It's a plantation. That was kind of like the entire function of it. You can't really talk about a plantation without talking about slavery. Like, what? That's like, again, and I keep making this comparison, but that's like having a concentration camp resort, right? And you talking about, yeah, we don't have any interest in left-wing radical stuff. We're not going to, dwell on past racial injustice. What? I'm confused. I am so confused. Imagine you go into a bakery and somebody's like, yeah, we're not going to focus on the making of bread here. We're not going to focus on that radical left stuff. What do you mean? We're in a bakery. That's the whole point of the bakery, to bake bread. Like, what are we focusing on in the bakery? There's nothing else to focus on. Ain't nobody making ice cream up in here or nothing. Like, what are we saying here, right? So how are you in a plantation talking about you don't want to focus on that racial injustice past? What are you talking about? You're in a plantation. If you don't want to focus on the racial injustice past, don't be in a plantation. How about you just build a resort? Clearly you got money if you about to try to rebuild this thing, right? So how about you just build a normal resort somewhere else instead of a plantation fantasy if you don't want to focus on the past racial injustices, right? You could easily build a normal resort somewhere, but no, you are making sure that you are on a plantation because, again, that is the entire point. That's the entire point. The entire point is for white people to live out their slavery fantasy, right? It's for white people to go down there and dress up and play Southern Belle, and go to dances and do their Scarlett O'Hara thing and so and so and so. Again, that's the entire point. That's the entire fantasy. If it wasn't, then you wouldn't be rebuilding a plantation. You would just build a regular resort, right? If it was not about the slavery aspect, you would just build a regular resort somewhere else, or even on this land. If you like, oh, I'm not trying to buy no new land, this is perfectly good land, you'd rebuild on this land and not market it as a plantation or any sort of whatever. No. But you make sure that that is what you are doing because, again, white people don't ever speak directly. They always speak in code. So you build a plantation and you just failed to mention slavery on the website, right? And you insist that you're not racist and you're ignoring that radical left aspect of whatever, right? But you're not though, because if you were, then again, you would just build a regular resort somewhere that is not a plantation, right? Or you would build on this land and not market it as a plantation, whatever, right? But this is y'all Southern Belle fantasy. When white people think about slavery, they think on it fondly. That's what they're too ashamed to say.